All right, site restructuring, preparation and planning. What do we need to be aware of or have in place before we actually begin the exercise? Let's start with site backups. I know I've already touched on this somewhat in the previous lesson, but it's very, very important for obvious reasons. Rule number one, never work with original sites or files. Always back up into a live staging environment. What I would recommend is using or copying the site into a staging environment so that it's actually live, so you can actually navigate around. I did this for a number of reasons. Firstly, to have a backup, obviously, but secondly, to be able to, as a point of reference, so that I could see what content lived on which pages before I went through or performed the actual site restructure. Because sometimes look, even if you pull the information down into a Google Sheet, it can be difficult to remember what content was where. So by doing it this way, you'll have a point of reference. You'll be able to go back and say, okay, well, that content was on this page before we performed a changeover. I've just found doing it that way, it made everything a lot easier just by having that point of reference. My next point here is exporting. So I would recommend exporting the existing site structure down into a Google Sheet for quick and easy reference. This will tie in with the site restructure planner that I'll touch on in a moment. But having a live copy of the site in a staging environment plus a copy of the site structure down into a Google Sheet is always recommended. My final point here is rollback. So be prepared for a quick rollback in case of any unforeseen issues during the changeover. Okay, always have someone that has the skill sets required in order to be able to back the site up, pull it into a live staging environment, and if necessary, roll the site back. Okay, measure twice, cut once. This is a general rule of thumb that I like to live by. I would much prefer to take my time thinking something through a little bit longer, as opposed to jumping in and finding out that I've gotten it wrong and I have to go back and perform the task twice over. So take your time with this. Okay, it's always best to take your time during the planning phase, so you can focus on getting it right. Okay, like I just said, you're much better off spending, maybe a day or 2 or 3 days if necessary, mapping out the site structure and going through it repeatedly until you've got it right. You'll know when you're confident you've got it right before you implement it. Okay, because you only want to go through that rollout implementation phase once. You don't want to have to go through it twice and be resetting redirects and performing backups, and it can get really, really messy. So my advice is to always take your time during the planning phase so you can just focus on getting it right. In my experience, sometimes I'll start this, I'll start the planning phase and I'll start working my way through in Notepad, mapping out the site structure, and for whatever reason, I just can't get it right. So I'll leave it and I'll come back to it the next day. Or sometimes I think I've got it right, and then I'll come back and look at it the next day and think, oh no, there's a much better way of doing that. So again, it's don't try and rush through this through the planning phase. Like I said, do it once. I strongly recommend only performing this action once rather than having to go back and fix it due to the time and work involved. Minimizing downtime and outages. This is definitely something you need to be mindful of, especially for larger sites where you've got to go through that changeover process. The first thing I'll say is scheduling. Okay, work with the client to determine the best time for the changeover. In other words, when are things quiet? Wednesday afternoons, Thursday nights, Monday afternoons. Like, when's the best time to implement the new site structure? Okay, always work with the client to determine the best time for the changeover. The client will usually always know, oh, well, things are pretty quiet on maybe Sunday, or maybe Wednesday nights are quiet. Whatever that day is, you'll need to take a look at it and take it into consideration. Okay, sometimes the day and time that the client gives you won't be most ideal. I say that for a reason, and this is exactly why I would not recommend Mondays or Fridays. Why? Because Mondays are usually always the busiest day of the week. You start mucking around on a e-commerce store and pulling a site apart and implementing new site structure on a Monday, that could be their busiest day. And if the site's down for 6 hours, that could cost, that could be expensive. You don't want to do that. Likewise, Fridays. If for whatever reason you're performing the changeover and something goes wrong, and it goes wrong 7 p.m. Friday evening, chances are there's going to be no one around over the weekend to help you fix it. Roll the site back, restore the old site, whatever the case might be. There's going to be no one to do support or whatever it is that you might need assistance with. And you certainly don't want the site down for 2 days over the weekend while you wait for someone to come back Monday morning. So scheduling for changeovers is incredibly important. I used to do a lot of changeovers in the middle of the night, 11, 12 p.m. I'd have my team members around. I'd say, guys, we're going to go through this changeover. It should go through in about an hour. I just need everyone on standby. That's ideal, because then you're going to minimize the disruption, and that's the whole point. Now, the next point that I've got here is cutoff, okay? Consider setting a cutoff point should the rollout take longer than expected. You'll know, okay, on average, it takes us about an hour to do the changeover. At the same time, knowing that, you should say, okay, if it gets to 3 hours and we're still having problems, we're going to roll back regardless. Okay, so make sure that, you're at least mindful of this, okay? You can't just go into it and go, well, we're still struggling here and it's been 6 hours. That's not good. You can't do that to clients. So consider setting a cutoff point. Should the rollout take longer than expected? Okay, guys, we're still at this at 4. We're going to roll back and we're going to figure this problem out later. For larger sites, consider staging the rollout rather than doing everything all at once. By this, I'm talking about if you have, let's say, a large e-commerce store and they have 10,000 products and there's 50,000 pages, I would not be trying to roll out site structure across 50,000 pages all at once. I would be staging the changes. So I would say, okay, let's target these 1,000 pages and we'll make these changes here. Let's do that, and then we'll start the next section. And we'll make sure that's all settled down, and then we'll start the next section. Okay, I wouldn't be doing large sites in one big hit, because doing it that way is just far too much risk involved. And if it goes sideways, it's going to go sideways big time. Okay, prioritizing content. What do I mean by this? Often, when you're working your way through a restructuring process, and you'll often find that you'll have gaps in site content. You'll need to factor this in, especially when removing or consolidating pages. What does that actually mean? Well, let's say that you have a site and you've added a new category, or you've removed a category, and there were several pages that lived in the subcategory section. Well, you've shuffled things around, and then all of a sudden you've realized, well, hang on a minute, we've created a new category here. We've got several pages that need to live within that category, but we don't have content for that category yet. This is very typical of when you work, when you're performing a site restructure. So sometimes you'll have gaps. Okay, you need to be aware of this before you start pulling everything apart, because you'll put it back to, well, hang on a minute, we've got pages here that don't exist. Where's the content? This is what I mean when I say you need to prioritize. So content may need to be readied ahead of restructuring to accommodate for blank or empty sections. Okay, this is what I've got in point 2. So you might, during the planning phase and restructuring phase, well, okay, it doesn't make sense for us to just blow these pages away and consolidate these pages, because that means that we're going to end up with a blank parent page or parent category page for these other pages here. That doesn't make any sense. What do we do? Well, maybe it might make more sense to have our content team work on these pages while we are planning out the restructure. That way you can have that content readied. Now, another option, if you don't want to do that, and that really depends on how much work is involved to do that. Obviously, you don't want to be working on the restructuring and phase and building out content for 7 months. You don't want to do that. If it's only like 2 or 3 pages, then do it. Another option, if that's not viable, is to simply hide sections. So another option is to simply turn pages off or hide them during the changeover until content is readied. So instead of stalling or delaying the changeover, you can actually go ahead with the changeover and say, okay, well, we don't have the content ready for these particular pages yet, so we'll just turn that section off and we'll come back to it later. Okay, you'll need to work it on a case-by-case basis, and there'll definitely be exceptions to the rule. Use some common sense here. It wouldn't make sense to turn off half a website because you don't have content ready, and at the same time, it wouldn't make sense to, say, oh, we're going to implement the restructure, but that might happen next year while we build out all of these pages. So you need to, again, use some common sense here in the way in which you handle this. Client assistance, I know I've already kind of touched on this, but I'll just touch on it quickly again because this is all part of preparation and planning. Assistance versus interference. Seek assistance from clients where required, but avoid situations where assistance turns into interference. Don't lose control. This is tremendously important. Don't let clients dictate the direction of the campaign, especially not during this part, because they will say, if you give them the opportunity to interfere, they will. The other thing that I'll say here is ensure that all parties are available during the changeover. Okay, so this includes testing and support and everything else. But where possible, have people around. If they've got external contractors that are handling other sections of the site, maybe they're doing paid, or maybe they've got their own web developers, or whatever the case might be, try and have those people around so that you're not there on your own. And you can make sure, more importantly, that everyone's happy and satisfied that everything's okay. Okay, redirects. Let's talk about redirects quickly. Preparation, when it comes to redirects, preparation is key. Okay, always know which pages are to be redirected, including where they need to be redirected to, ahead of the changeover. So redirects can be implemented without delay. You should not be rolling out a new site structure and then, we better start thinking about our redirects. You don't want to do that, okay? Then this is why I say it's always best to have, if you can, site in a load staging environment, as well as the provided resources and everything else, which I'll touch on in just a second. But have all proposed redirects set out and ready before getting started, okay? I used to just have these down in a notepad file, and I would go through the implementation of those redirects in phases, and I'll be showing you that in a live demonstration in just a minute. Next, use the Site Restructure Planner. This is a tool that I just mentioned. The Site Restructure Planner is provided. It's available within the resources section of the forum. It will help you keep organised and prevent potential mishaps and errors from occurring during the changeover. It will also help provide clear guidance and direction in terms of action items for each intended change. Okay, whether or not you need to add a new page, remove a page, consolidate pages, whatever the case might be. Okay, lastly, performing the changeover. A couple of quick notes here about what to be mindful of when implementing the new site structure. Speed is key. Implement the new site structure quickly without delay. You'll want a short changeover period. Okay, you don't want to be halfway through and then, okay, we'll finish the rest off next week. It should be, okay, we're going to commit. We need to implement the new site structure. Boom, we're going to get in and we're going to do it in one hit and we're going to get it done. My next point here is no distractions for large sites, especially for large sites where you need to stay focused and concentrating without distractions. Be sure to allocate time that's uninterrupted to perform the work. You can't have people all over you, your phone ringing and getting emails while you're in the middle of rolling out a new site structure, especially for big sites. Okay, you've got to say to everyone, hey, I've got to make this change today. Or if you've got team, ideally you should have team members doing this for you. Make sure that they're assigned to take care of that task and that task only. And lastly, completion. Always work to completion. Okay, avoid partial site structure applications. In other words, you want to see this thing through from start to finish. You don't want to do half a rollout and then stop and think, I will finish the other half next week. You certainly don't want to implement the new site structure and say, we'll set the redirects next Wednesday. Always go through the entire process of implementing the new site structure, implementing or applying the redirects, and then testing. Test, and make sure that everything is right. Don't ever make the assumption that, okay, we're done, let's go, have a great weekend, and then come back on Monday to some really angry emails. So make sure that you work quickly without distractions and you work to completion.